Here is episode 2 of Mafia's redemption. The night Elena nursed Matteo back from the brink changed everything. What began as a desperate plea from a broken father became the first thread of an unlikely bond. But in a world built on violence and power, nothing comes without a price. This is episode 2 of Mafia's redemption. The morning light crept through the heavy curtains of the mansion, casting pale golden streaks across the nursery floor. Dante had not slept. He stood in the doorway, watching Elena rock Matteo gently in her arms. The baby had finally fallen into a deep, peaceful sleep, his tiny chest rising and falling with steady rhythm. It was the first time in days that the house had felt anything close to calm. Elena looked exhausted. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her dress was wrinkled from the long night. But there was something different about her now. The hollow emptiness that had consumed her was slowly being replaced by quiet purpose. She hummed a soft melody, one she remembered her own mother singing to her as a child. Matteo stirred slightly, then settled again, his tiny fingers wrapped around her thumb. Dante cleared his throat. Elena looked up startled. She had almost forgotten he was there. He stepped into the room, his movements careful and deliberate, as if approaching something fragile. Dante spoke softly, his voice rough with emotion. He thanked her. He said she had saved his son's life, and he would never forget it. He owed her everything. Elena shook her head. She said she hadn't done it for him. She had done it for the baby. She couldn't bear to watch another child slip away. Dante nodded slowly. He understood. He asked her what she wanted in return. Money, a house, anything. It would be hers. Elena looked at him, her eyes tired but steady. She said she didn't want his money. She had lost everything. Her husband, her child, her home. Money couldn't bring them back. She had nothing left to want. Dante studied her for a long moment. He saw a woman who had been shattered and was somehow still standing. He saw strength beneath the grief, and something else he couldn't quite name. He made her an offer. He asked her to stay. Elena blinked in surprise. She asked what he meant. Dante explained that Matteo needed her. Not just for milk, but for everything. He needed a mother's love, a mother's warmth. He was a man who knew nothing about raising a child. He had grown up in a world of violence and betrayal, where weakness was punished and trust was a weapon used against you. He couldn't give his son the softness he needed, but she could. Elena looked down at the sleeping baby in her arms. She felt the weight of him, the warmth of his small body pressed against her chest. He was so vulnerable, so utterly dependent on her now. She thought of her own child, the one she had never been able to hold. She felt a tear slip down her cheek. She asked Dante if he understood what he was asking. She was broken. She wasn't sure she had anything left to give. Dante knelt beside her chair, his eyes meeting hers. He said he understood broken. He had been broken long before she arrived. But he had also learned that broken things could still be beautiful. They could still be worth saving. He wasn't asking her to be perfect. He was asking her to be present. Elena was silent for a long time. She thought about her empty apartment, the silence that awaited her there. Finally, she nodded. She said she would stay, but only for the baby. She made no promises about anything else. Dante exhaled, relief washing over his features. He stood and extended his hand. She hesitated, then took it. His grip was firm, but not threatening. It felt almost like an anchor. Over the next few days, a fragile routine began to form. Elena spent her days in the nursery, caring for Matteo around the clock. She bathed him, dressed him, sang to him. She talked to him about everything and nothing, filling the silence with her voice. The baby responded with small coos and gurgles, his eyes following her every move. Dante watched from a distance. He came to the nursery several times a day, always standing in the doorway, never quite entering. He asked about Matteo's feeding schedule, his sleeping patterns. But he rarely asked about Elena herself. It was as if he was afraid to get too close. One evening, Elena found Dante in the library, staring at a portrait on the wall. It was a painting of a beautiful woman with dark hair and warm eyes. She held a small baby in her arms. Elena recognized Mateo's features in the woman's face. Elena asked softly if that was Mateo's mother. Dante turned, his expression guarded. He said yes. Her name was Isabella. She had died giving birth to Mateo, a complication the doctors had missed. She had been the only person in the world who made him feel human. When she died, he thought he had died too.
Elena stepped closer.
She said she was sorry. She knew what it was like to lose someone you loved. Dante looked at her, his eyes searching hers. He asked if she ever thought about moving forward, about letting go. Elena was quiet for a moment. She said she thought about it every day. But letting go felt like betraying the memory of her husband and child. It felt like admitting they were really gone. Dante nodded slowly. He said he understood. But he also said that holding on too tightly could destroy you. It could turn you into a ghost, walking through life without really living. He had been that ghost for months. Then Mateo came, and then she came, and for the first time, he felt something other than cold. Elena looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the pain he carried behind his eyes. It was the same pain she carried in her own heart. They were two broken people, standing in the ruins of their lives, reaching for something they didn't quite understand. She asked him why he had become what he was, why he had chosen a life of crime and violence. Dante's jaw tightened. He said he hadn't chosen it. It had chosen him. His father was a powerful man in the underworld, and he had been groomed since childhood to take over. There had been no other path. He had done terrible things, things that haunted him in the dark hours of the night. But he had also protected people. He had built an empire that kept his family safe, that kept his men loyal. He had believed it was the only way. Elena asked if he still believed that. He asked her if she thought people could change. Elena thought about her own life. She thought about the woman she had been before the accident, full of hope and dreams. She thought about the woman she was now, scarred and grieving. She said she believed people could change, but it had to come from inside. It couldn't be forced. Dante nodded slowly. He said he wanted to be better. For Mateo. For her.
But he didn't know how.
Elena reached out and placed her hand on his arm. It was the first time she had touched him voluntarily. She said he had already taken the first step.
He had asked for help.
That was more than most people ever did. The tension between them softened. Dante covered her hand with his own, his fingers warm against her skin. They stood in silence, two souls adrift, finding an unexpected harbor in each other. But outside the mansion walls, shadows were gathering. Not everyone was pleased with the new arrangement. In a dimly lit office across the city, a man named Vittorio sat behind a massive desk, his fingers steepled in thought. He was Dante's second-in-command, a man who had served the Rossetti family for decades. He had watched Dante grow from a ruthless young soldier into a feared leader, and he had seen the cracks beginning to form. The associate asked what Vittorio intended to do. Vittorio leaned forward, his eyes glittering with cold ambition. He said he intended to remind Dante what it meant to be a Rossetti. And if that failed, he would take matters into his own hands. The family was more important than any one man, even the boss. Back at the mansion, Elena was feeding Mateo in the nursery when she noticed a shadow pass by the door. She looked up, but no one was there. A chill ran down her spine. She told herself it was nothing, just her imagination playing tricks. But the feeling of being watched lingered. That night, as she lay in the guest room Dante had prepared for her, she heard footsteps in the hallway. They were slow and deliberate, pausing outside her door before moving on. She held her breath until they faded away. The next morning, Dante found her in the kitchen, her hands trembling as she poured tea. He asked her if something was wrong. She hesitated, then told him about the footsteps. Dante's expression hardened. He said she was safe. No one would touch her while he was alive. But she noticed the way his jaw tightened, the way his hand instinctively moved to the gun at his hip. He told her to stay close to the nursery and not to go anywhere alone. He would assign someone to watch over her. Elena asked if she was in danger. Dante looked at her, and she saw fear in his eyes for the first time. He said he would make sure she wasn't. But he couldn't promise that his world wouldn't try to tear them apart. It had a way of doing that to anything good. Elena reached for his hand. She said she wasn't afraid. She had already lost everything. There was nothing left to take. Dante held her gaze, his voice barely above a whisper. He said she was wrong. She still had herself. And she had Matteo. And maybe, just maybe, she had him too. In that moment, something shifted between them. It was fragile and uncertain, like a flame flickering in the wind. But it was there. And it was real. Outside, the storm clouds were gathering again. Vittorio was making his move, and the fragile piece of the mansion was about to be shattered. Dante had chosen love over power, compassion over control. But in his world, that choice came with consequences. As Elena held Matteo close that evening, she felt a sense of foreboding she couldn't shake. She looked out the window and saw headlights approaching the gate. A car she didn't recognize. Dante appeared beside her, his face grim.
He said it was time.
The reckoning had come. He took her hand and squeezed it gently. He told her to stay with Matteo and not to come out no matter what she heard.
He would handle it.
He promised he would protect them. Elena asked him to be careful. Dante smiled, a sad smile that didn't reach his eyes. He said he had never had anything worth being careful for before, but now he did. He walked toward the door, closed behind him with a heavy thud, and the silence that followed was more terrifying than any sound. What happens when Dante faces the man who once stood beside him? Will Elena and Matteo be caught in the crossfire? The battle for the soul of the Rossetti family has only just begun. If you want to see how this story continues, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss episode 3 of Mafia's redemption. The stakes are rising, and nothing will ever be the same.